Tower defense games have grown into their own pretty large genre over the last couple years, and 2016 has brought us quite a few pretty good examples. I'm Falcon, and today on gameranx, we're going to talk the 10 best tower defense games of 2016. Number 10 is Aegis of Earth, Protonovus Assault, which might sound like a bit of a complicated title, but the game itself is very innovative and very interesting. To say this is a different spin on tower defense would not only be a good pun, but a very accurate statement. There's two things that are different about this game that you typically don't see in tower defense. The first is that everything is circular. There's also a lot of RPG elements that have been incorporated into this game that keep it more interesting over time than I think your typical tower defense game generally stays. Now, there are a couple of downsides to this game. It's not something that I would personally ding it for, but the graphics are not impressive in the least. That's not a big deal for me. I just really want a good game personally, and this delivers on that. Other big caveat is if you play this game on the PC, it's kinda garbage. You need to play it with a controller or with the keyboard only. For a lot of users, it crashes a lot, and there's no official way to exit the game. Number 9 is Zombie City Defense 2, which is a better sequel to a pretty good game in the first place. This game kind of takes the RTS light approach, focusing entirely on combat, obviously with it being a tower defense game, but you do have some small degree of building that you have to do in order to maintain resources. So it's not the simplest thing you've ever played in your life. There is a little bit more management than a lot of tower defense games, and revolves mostly around upgrading existing units. What's cool about the graphics is they sort of take a drone approach. It's intended to look as though you're watching what you're looking at through a drone's camera, which I think works really well instead of trying to go for like a photorealistic look. I've stated in other videos I much prefer a stylistic approach. This game delivers on that, as well as a well-balanced RTS/tower defense experience, and shockingly enough, kind of feels unique. Number 8, Infinium Strike, which if you can't glean that it's in space from that title, I don't know whether you're alive or dead. Now I want to say right off that some people love this game and some people, are a little cool on it. To me, the big thing that actually works out really well for this game is the thing that some people don't like, but a lot of people do. I think it depends on what you want out of a game, and that is the fact that it gives you 4 screens that you have to defend, and you can only look at them at one at a time. It essentially handicaps you directly in the gameplay, inherently, and forces you to think outside the box a little bit. Now, this is something that I don't know everyone is going to like, but I think that it should be commended for at least trying something new, because like I said earlier, this has become a very big genre, and it can get susceptible to very generic titles. It's nice to see stuff like this. Number 7 is Defenders 2, which is a slightly more standard take on the tower defense genre, albeit with one change that you see in very few games. There's a steal mechanic, which I actually rather like quite a bit on account I like the idea the stakes are a little bit higher than just my stuff can get destroyed. I mean, if things can actually be stolen, that's quite a step forward as far as I'm concerned. Now, the graphics themselves are not astounding in any way, but I love the color palette. It is very colorful without being overtly mismatched in any way. Everything feels very coherent, and it runs pretty darn well, even on a lower end phone. I mean, not really low end. Now, beyond that additional mechanic that's added, it is a bit of a standard game, but being it adds something that kind of mixes everything up and adds another layer of what you have to do with your strategy, I think that it's a fantastic addition to the genre itself, and I'm interested to see if other games will start to incorporate this idea or similar ideas. Number 6, Infectonator Survivors is a pretty ambitious title that essentially combines RTS, roguelike, management simulation, and of course, tower defense. And these might sound like some fairly disparate elements, but they really do come together to form something that plays very good. It also looks quite pretty. I like the pixel art graphics. Shockingly enough, this list doesn't have a lot of pixel art on it, and I have to say that when there's less pixel art as a whole, pixel art seems more appealing to me. It can be overused is all I'm saying. Not so in this game, and another cool thing that this game has is this lighting system that really generates some some cool looking effects for such an old school looking game. It has a mouse-based movement system, which is something you aren't going to talk a whole lot about in other games on this list, or even really a movement system at all. Oftentimes you just place things and let things play out, but you have a little bit more direct control in this game, and I like the scavenging that they ask you to do. On top of that, the soundtrack is killer. Number 5 is Mushroom Wars 2, which builds on a lot of the really cool things from Mushroom Wars 1, specifically the fast pacing and the more RTS influenced gameplay. But the sequel has reworked environmental stuff. It plays much better in different environments. It feels a lot more specific, and the new multiplayer options, including co-op, make this effectively a much better version of its predecessor. Number 4 is Kingdom Rush Frontiers, which I have to give the rating of the most solid tower defense game you can get. Now, solid doesn't necessarily mean innovative, and I often favor innovative just a little bit more, but that being said, if you're looking for essentially a basic tower defense game, you aren't going to get better than this. This is the gold standard as far as I'm concerned with that. What separates it is kind of the details. As many people say, the devil's in the details, and it does more with map-specific type of units and actions than I think your run-of-the-mill tower defense game is going to. It also incorporates a lot of good elements like mid-stage path changing and ups the difficulty level from the previous game in the series. It has a pretty distinct visual style that reminds me of what would happen if you combine Plants vs. Zombies with old-school Worms. But it's all tower defense. It's not trying to reinvent the genre, it's just trying to give you the absolute best example of tower defense, and it does that. Number 3, Toy Soldiers Complete brings you all of the DLC and all of the add-ons, everything that you can have for Toy Soldiers, which is a very fun and sometimes very goofy version of the tower defense game. The twist that you get in Toy Soldiers is that you can directly control units and make them do what you need them to do, and no joke, it really feels like a miniaturized game. You have to play on a game board that definitely shows it as Toy Soldiers. That being said, it has a very intense feel to it, and it incorporates the action elements as well as an 80s toy aesthetic very, very well. I really enjoyed this game, and I think it brings enough to the genre that other developers should look at it and think about what it does right, because I think it probably could be something that pushes the genre forward. Number 2 is Space Run Galaxy, which kind of gives you action, strategy, and RPG elements on top of the tower defense core gameplay elements. With a lot of tower defense games, a story isn't really included that is what you would call interesting or enjoyable or really necessary, but this game actually manages to do that and sort of overloads the experience with charm, if you ask me. It's also rather funny at times, and I certainly appreciate that. Really quick, really important note, sometimes their servers are overloaded, and although they've done a good job adding more since the original sort of rush to the game, because the game is doing very well, sometimes it still gets overloaded. I mean, that's a sign it's a fun game that people really like to play, so, I mean, it makes sense. And finally, number 1 is going to Kingdom New Lands. It's a game that essentially trounces a lot of much more expensive productions in simple aesthetics and some major gameplay ideas that sort of carry it through to be number 1. This is a tower defense game that incorporates exploration and progression elements in a way that I don't think any of the other games on this list do. And I can't overstate how pretty this game is. This is how pixel art is supposed to look in 2016. Not necessarily a step back. Certainly, there are more limitations with pixel art, but this is not a game that I think suffers because of a retro stylistic choice. My only misgiving with this game is that it's not the longest game in the world, but really a tower defense game maybe isn't supposed to be. But this thing sort of takes it to a level that I don't think a lot of other games do, and it's pretty much the balance of really solid gameplay with new elements to the genre and systems that encourage you to come back that I think just puts it in the perfect spot. Kingdom New Lands is so incredibly involving and enjoyable that if you like the genre, you have to try it. What was your favorite tower defense oriented game this year? Let's meet down in the comments and have a conversation about that. If you enjoyed this video, have to ask, please click the like button, it helps us a lot, and don't forget to subscribe. We upload brand new videos every day of the week, and the best way to see them first is a subscription. As always, we thank you very much for watching. watching this video. I'm Falcon. You can follow me on Twitter at FalconTheHero, and we'll see you next time right here on gameranx.